Hi, I'm Colleen. Let's do a December TBR. Hi, I'm Colleen Delaney. If you're new here, I talk about books and writing. It's been a while since I did like one of my more traditional videos, I feel like, so today is going to be one. If this is your first time, in the description, I always put links to my newsletter and a bunch of books I've written. My most recent release is Bewitching Rosemary, which is a cozy paranormal romance about a witch finding her soulmate. Let's talk about what I'm going to read in December. Because it's the end of the year, and ideally I would have read all of these books this year. That's my entire TBR, plus some tarot cards I keep over here. I thought I would just come up here and tell you the order in which I'm going to read these books, because that's going to depend how many books I depend. I'm going to try to stick with this order. Without further ado, let's just get into it. First is Daughter of Mine by Megan Miranda. Spoiler, I'm filming this on December 2nd. I finished this yesterday. I flew through this book, so I'm still putting on my December TBR because it's not going to be in my November wrap-up. I flew through this book. I read the first 100 pages on November 30th, and then I finished the rest of the book. I think it was 350 pages total yesterday, which was Sunday, and it was wonderful. It'd been a long time since I found a thriller that just sort of sucked me into the world and couldn't let go, so I was very happy about that. So I'll give you a full review in my December wrap, but this was my first book on my December TBR, and it's already completed. And of course, I finished that book yesterday afternoon, so I had to read a little before bed, and I read just the prologue of The Wild Huntress by Emily Lloyd-Jones. This is a YA fantasy based loosely, I think, on the Mabignon, which I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correctly, even though I studied it thoroughly in college. It's a Welsh folklore collection is the best way I can describe it to you. I'm really liking the voice so far. It is reminding me of that kind of like Juliette Marillier setting where you're there's this layer of a fae world on top of the human world that not everyone can see. So I'm excited to read this now. I was a little nervous about getting a YA because I have a hard time with YA sometimes, but I am now super excited to read this one. It is kind of long, but starting off the month with the book finished in a day, I feel like it's okay if I have to spend 5 or 6 days reading the next one. After I finish that, my plan is to let myself read All the Ways to Ruin a Rogue by Sophie Jordan, which I think is the second book in the Debutante Files series. I don't necessarily read Sophie Jordan's backlist in order. And the reason is if you follow me, you might be like, wait a second, you just read A Breaking Case of Emergency, Sophie Jordan, Regency romance. And you know what? It made me so happy. I don't know why I've been waiting to read these after I've read some books in other genres that are slow. That's basically what I've been doing. I just want to read them. So if you follow me on Blue Sky, which you probably don't because I haven't been there very long, I put up a post a couple days ago asking people to recommend their favorite historical romance authors who I maybe haven't read. And I have been able to compile a list of probably close to 100 authors who I cannot wait to dive into because historical romance makes me happy. And I am sad that the genre is taking a hit right now, but maybe I'm part of the problem. I was someone who read a ton of historical romance and then was like, oh, I should read more contemporary fiction, regular historical fiction, thrillers, mysteries, lit fic, and kind of moved away from my dopamine books. Let's bring dopamine books back. That's going to be the theme of 2025, I think. Bringing back dopamine books. So after I've read that, I do really want to try to read The Ministry of Time. I really pride myself on trying to read every book of the month pick that I get before the year is up. And I have decided, I think, to skip December because there were no books on the December list that were screaming to me. And I have quite a few. I mean, I already finished one, but The Wild Huntress is a book of the month pick. This is a book of the month pick. I have one more in my pile. And I would really like to finish these by at least mid-January so I can do my wrap up of everything I bought this year, which I like to do. The Ministry of Time, it's a time travel story. And I've been pitching this book and telling you I'm going to read it since May. So it's December. That is too many months. That is 7 months. This has probably been on 7 TBRs and I still haven't read it. So this is the month I have to read it. I have to finish it. Or, you know what? In all honesty, I have to read 100 pages of it. And if I decide I want to DNF it, that's fine. I only DNF'd one book of the month pick so far this year. And I feel like 2 is okay. I feel comfortable if I end up DNFing 2. But I have to give it a good go. I can't read. I think I've read 12 pages and then stopped. 10 pages, less than that. I have to read 100 pages and then I can decide what I'm going to do with this. Okay? And actually, it's perfect. A chapter starts on page 101. I'll let you know what happens. After that, we get into a little bit more of territory of like books that I'm not sure if I'm going to continue reading in this order. I'm going to really try to do these 3 in this specific order in the next like 2 weeks, hopefully less. But now we get into more like, what do I feel like reading? So I have Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies by Heather Fawcett, which I've been wanting to read for a while. This is like, I feel like I'm late to the party. Everybody read this a while ago, probably a year ago. I think that's when it came out in hardcover. But it's rivals to lovers. It's like Professor of Fairies, which sounds like something I would have done in my 20s. And I heard the setting is very cozy. I did hear it's more like a late autumn story and now we are starting winter, but I don't know about you. My Decembers are pretty dreary here. They're not really like snowy and Christmassy. So I think it'll be a good time of year to pick up this book and read it. Another book that's been on my TBR for a while is The Witch Collector. I bought this in May, full well knowing I wasn't going to read this until winter. I think I'm going to read it in December. I might end up reading it in January, but I definitely want to read it in the next 2 months when we're in our winter. By February, I start feeling like I want to read about spring. So I want to read this either in December or January. I don't know much about it other than it's romantasy. So that's like what I'm going in with, and that's what I'm going to stay with. Sometimes I like to not know too much about a book before I start it. All right, let's talk about some big honkin' thick books. Oh my gosh. I'm in a book club and we were talking about what we're going to read next, and all the recommendations were like 500 to 650 pages long, between 500 and 650 pages long. And I was like, dudes, I don't want to read a 600-page book. That's not something I'm picking for myself. But here's one that I am picking for myself, and this is, let's see how long this is. 559 pages, The Secret History. You might be asking, why on earth am I going to read The Secret History in December or maybe January? Because this is a book one should read in September. Here's the thing. And here's also the thing why I don't think I'm necessarily going to finish this in December. I'm going to start it. I am very busy. Like September through December. Anyone who has elementary school age children, and then you've also had 3 of your children's birthdays are in those months, know that it's a very, very busy time of year. For the first time in my life, I'm super looking forward to January and February because it's a quiet time of year. There's not that much going on. None of my kids have birthdays. It's snowy and cold and no one really expects you to do much on the weekends. That's when I'm going to be able to read The Secret History. So I'm going to try to read at least 100 or 200 pages of it this month. And maybe I'll get sucked in and just fly through it. But I'm not going to like pressure myself to fly through it. Just a weird thing about being on BookTube is the pressure to sort of like read as many books as possible. I think back to when I worked at the indie bookstore for a while, and we did a thing where each of us would read a classic in the summer, and then we'd make this like, we do this thing in our newsletter where it was like all the classics we read and everyone reviews them. And the first summer I did it, I read Anna Karenina. And you know what? It took me like 6 weeks to read Anna Karenina. I didn't not read anything else while I was reading it, but I slogged through that book. I'm really happy I read it though. Is it my favorite classic ever? No. But I did the next couple of years. My classics wildly shifted. The next year I did Alice in Wonderland. The year after that I did Candide, which is also very short. And I can't remember what the last one I did was. Maybe we didn't do it that summer. I don't remember. But so I'd like to get a chunk read of The Secret History. Okay, that's how I'm going to look at it. And I've got some really thick books on here that I've been kind of like intimidated to start. And I think I need to start just putting them on my TBR like that. I'm going to read a chunk of this month. I'm not necessarily going to finish it because that takes some of the pressure off. And then this book I'm pretty sure I'm going to read in January. But it's The Witch and the Tsar by Olesya Selenikova Gilmore. I just know this is like witches and Russia, and I think Baba Yaga, which sounds like me, like something I would really like. This has a large glossary in the back, which I adore, and a big author's note. When's the actual end of this? So it's 399 pages. It actually looks much thicker than it is. That's not that long of a book. I guess next to Secret History, it doesn't look that big anymore. Maybe I'll read that in December if I'm feeling like particularly witchy. Then I'm just going to talk about 4 or 5 more books. I'm not going to go through every single book on here that I think have a chance of being some December reads. The Great Believers by Rebecca Makkai. I don't know if I'm going to read this in December, but I do really want to read this book. I've just kind of been like, I know it's going to be sad, which makes it harder for me to start. Faithful by Alice Hoffman. I just love Alice Hoffman. I have 2 Alice Hoffman books on this list. I'm not sure which one I'm going to read first, but this one has just been kind of calling to me, and it might be that the cover just feels wintry to me, even though it's floral because of the blue. The Night of the Witch. I don't think I'm going to read this in December because I think if I'm picking between these 2, I'm probably going to do The Witch and the Tsar, and I do think I am going to be picking between those 2. But just in case, I thought I'd throw it on here in case I decide I do want to read this. I read the first chapter and I liked it. I can't remember if it's, yeah, it is winter, December. Maybe I will read this in December. Now I don't know. I'm going to read some more reviews of this and see if I feel like this has the wintry, witchy vibes that I crave. Also not that long, 403 pages. I know that is a series though. And then lastly, I have Here on Earth by Alice Hoffman. Obviously another Alice Hoffman that I might get into this month. But if you asked me if I had to pick between these 2, I think I'd pick Faithful just because of the vibes. Lastly, I have these 2, The Spell for Disappearing and The Turkey Rumble, which I got for free from Book of the Month, which are just little short stories. I might read these. I feel like I've been already at a lot of doctor's appointments with my kids. Nothing like last year. If you were following me last year, November and December were absolutely terrible with how sick everyone in my family was. Knock on wood. We are not having that kind of year yet. I do have one child with strep throat, but that's not bad comparatively. And she's back at school. Lastly, I forgot to write this down. What is it called? I have several books on my Kindle that I might read. And then there's one book that I haven't bought yet that I think I might buy. But since I can't remember titles and authors' names right now, which is a little depressing. One is Susanna Clark, her new book. I can't believe I didn't write this down. She has a midwintery book that is out that I feel like I will probably see in a small print version. Hopefully, I don't think it's only ebook at my local bookstore when I am shopping for my family for their book presents. And I will buy it for myself and I will put it in my stocking. But I can't remember what it's called right now. I know that Midwinter is in the title. I've never read a Susanna Clark, but I've always wanted to. And I feel like this little short collection, which I think is like 60 pages, would be a good jumping off point. Next, I know I have a book up here that's called something like North is Night. North is the night, north of the night. You're looking at the cover right now thinking, Colleen, why can't you remember this? And I don't actually remember who the author is at all, but I remember that it is a Finnish folklore retelling, which recently in my family, we've been having quite the resurgence of interest in Finland. And I don't even know why I call resurgence. I went through a small time being obsessed with Finland in my late 20s. I went there on my honeymoon and my son is now extremely obsessed with Finland, just kind of out of nowhere. And so I've been doing a little bit more research on like Finnish folklore and the history of Finland for maybe a future project. And so when I saw that arc, I was like, oh, I want to read that book. So maybe also I'll read that. I don't have a Kindle book on this list. I just realized I am really slowly reading Deja Brew by Celestine Martin. I think it's Celestine Martin, which is not timely at all. I just never got to it in October, so that's been my I can't fall asleep and it's 2 a.m. book, because I always have to have one of those on Kindle, and it's very sweet. I don't know if I'll finish that in December. Again, let's knock on wood again. Don't usually get a lot of insomnia in December. We'll see what happens. Though I should say I tend to, when I have insomnia in December, put on a Hallmark Christmas movie instead of read. So that might be part of it. But we'll see. Okay, so that's a chunky TBR. I looked and saw last December I read 10 books, but I'm going to write more this year than I did last year. So I don't know. We'll see how many I actually read. Let's hope at least 7. If you're still hanging out, thank you. Please in the comments, let me know what book you are most excited to read in December. Do you just wait until Christmas or whatever holiday you celebrate? I think Hanukkah is after Christmas this year. Do you, or Yule or whatever you might celebrate in December, do you wait and see like what books you get as a present? Do you buy yourself gifts? Are you trying to tackle some books you really decided you wanted to read in 2024 and didn't get to, and now you're like, oh my gosh, I have 4 weeks. Whatever you're reading or excited about reading, I hope you do finish whatever you were hoping for in 2024. If you've made it this far and don't want to write words, I will take an evergreen tree and you can decide whether or not it's the plain evergreen tree emoji or the decorated for winter holiday evergreen tree emoji. And as always, I hope you're in the middle of a good book, about to start reading a good book, or about to start writing a great book. I'll see you soon.